Welcome to our presentation on co-building a new eco-social world. We are the advisory board, or part of the advisory board of the Kendall Institute for International Social Work Education. We'd like to thank the organization for having us share our thoughts. And I'd like to introduce the panel. I'm Peter Szto, and I'm at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And we have Dr. Cudore Snell from Howard University, and Dr. Carol Cohen from Adelphi University, and Dr. Martha Bragin from the Silverman School of Social Work at Hunter. So we are going to share our ideas and thoughts. It's basically a conversation we like to invite you into us. And I want to talk about the Kendall Institute and our namesake and a little bit of background, who she was and what she did as a background to our conversation. So Katherine A. Kendall was a leader in social work education. She moved from Scotland to the United States and got her social work education in different schools in the US. And there she just really took off with a lot of passion about social work practice and on a larger scale, how social work could have an impact around the world. Before she passed on, she established the Katherine A. Kendall Institute in 2004, which is who we represent. The mission of the Kendall Institute is before you. And I'd like to just read that. The Kendall Institute for International Social Work Education was established in 2004 with a mission to promote programs and initiatives within the American social work education community. The mission seeks to equip practitioners and researchers with appropriate knowledge and requisite skills for practice within an increasingly interdependent global community. And I'd like to highlight just two broad activities that the Kendall Institute is involved with. The first one is that we provide annual 3-year grants, and there are a lot of it's a competitive process, but it does a lot of good things. It supports faculty and students in different ways, and it also disseminates different curricular resources and ideas. And the goal is to expand connections around the world, but also to influence students back in the United States. A second focus is that we want to have a global impact, and we want to promote standards of excellence. What is good practice? How to help people around the world in different contexts. And so influencing international social work education is a high priority, particularly in the United States. And we do this by way of collaboration with different global partners around the world. I'd like to invite you to look at the Kendall website. There's more information there. And if you have questions, you can contact us by way of the website. And I'd like to pass the time now to Dr. Snell, and he's going to share about his activities.
Thank you, Dr. Szto. Howard University School of Social Work was fortunate enough to be one of the beneficiaries of the Kendall Institute grant program. And we're very grateful for that because it ties in with our vision and mission to prepare our students for leadership in America, but also the global community. So the idea was to develop a toolkit for an international service learning program for historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs. You may not know this, but historically, HBCUs, slightly more than 3% study abroad as undergraduates, compared to a 10% participation rate for all students. So we are hoping that this toolkit will likely assist in closing the gap. But there are many reasons as to why our students at HBCUs don't participate in international service learning programs. And it has to do with financial constraints, lack of support and encouragement from faculty, community, and family members for study abroad, attrition rates, limited exposures to opportunities, and so forth. But we also know that our HBCUs are also oftentimes constrained by restricted resources at the institutional level. That may include funding capacity and staffing, travel risk management experience, and lack of entree with host countries and language barriers. And so at Howard, we have a very strong background in the arena, having just completed 10 years of successful international service learning program with Cape Town, South Africa, where we take about 24 students and a few faculty to spend the spring break there. So as a result of our experiences, we have developed, and we are close to finalizing, the toolkit, which will be very helpful to other institutions as well, not just to HBCUs. And it's also, it will have meaning for undergraduate as well as graduate students. So just to let you know, to give you an idea of what will be in the toolkit, is that we will talk about what international service learning means. We will also help and show you how to create an international service learning program and how to build partnerships within the host country. We will include a sample of an international service learning course. Our students get credit, 3 credit courses for this. How to secure funding. Our students have been very fortunate in terms of having this international service learning program funded by the Dean of the School of Social Work, where we cover their airfare and their hotel, and they only have to make allowances for their living expenses while they're in country, because we realize that financial constraints are a problem. So we'll also show you how you select and how we recruit students and who will participate, because it's a very competitive program. We would love all of our students to be able to have this global experience, but for self-evident complications, we're not able to do that. We'll show you how to go about planning the travel, how we will give you a blueprint for an idea of what to do in country. It's academic, yes, but we also want to expose our students to prepare them for the world in terms of understanding cultural and social events. And so we also will end with some ideas about how we can sustain this program. You know, we don't believe in academic tourism. We want this to be sustainable so that our students can benefit and contribute to international social education. So thank you so much. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much for all that exciting information. And I'd like to pass on the time next to Dr. Cohen.
That's great. Thank you so much, Peter and Cudore. So actually, you were talking about one of the really extraordinary competitive grant awardees that Kendall conducts each year. And as a 3-year project, it's going to be pretty exciting to see how it all turns out. I know you're in the middle right now, I think. What I'm going to share is about the Fulbright Partnership, which is a little bit different in that it's a direct connection between Kendall through its partnership with CSWE. We were asked to become part of the Fulbright Partnership program. As you probably know, if you're in the United States, but perhaps not from outside knowing the history of it, but Fulbright was created in 1946, currently operating in 160 countries, and it's housed in the Department of Educational and Cultural Affairs of the U.S. Department of State. It is a broad scope program. There are 4 different programs. They're enumerated at the end of this slide, but it's there is the traditional Fulbright program that most US scholars know about. That's when you go for 6 months or a year. The specialist program is shorter term for US scholars, and that's between 2 and 6 weeks, usually in one meeting, but could be more than one. Student Fulbrights are for students from the US as well as from around the world to come to the United States. And the visiting scholars, it's an unfortunate name perhaps, but it means international scholars, scholars from outside of the US who are hosted by US-based universities. And so Fulbright has a hand in so much of this international cross fertilization and learning. One of the key components of all Fulbrights is what do you do when you come back home, no matter where home is. And I think that's an important piece for social work. So social work is one of the 24 disciplines that are included in the Fulbright roster, has not been the largest uptake of Fulbrights. We're hoping that it will increase, but there certainly have been some since the very beginning of the program. Our partnership is designed to expand social work, both educators, leaders, students, practitioners, their participation in Fulbrights throughout the world in each of these 4 programs that I mentioned. Thanks for moving on to the next slide. So part of our plans are to move forward as this collaborative partner, which means that we share to jointly advertise. And in fact, we've mounted 2 programs already in concert, which are specifically for the social work profession. And I think folks in related fields could relate to it as well. And we've done it already for the Fulbright Scholars Program and the US Student Program. We have in mind to do at least 2 more in this coming year. Those are all readily available and links through the Kendall Institute website. We're launching a full-blown webpage for this, and that will be up soon. And a bunch of us are involved with trying to get a much better and complete inventory of social work uptake of all of these programs in Fulbright. We do have a regular feature at our annual conference, the annual program meeting of CSWE. We'll do so again, and we have invited representatives from those programs that are very willing to come and share and perhaps even have a reception for y'all. So we're encouraging student networks to help each other, as well as connecting faculty to meet with each other and doing mentoring, advisement on applications and publicity. Lots more things listed here. I think what we're hoping you think about at the end of what I'm saying is, are there new ideas for us to consider? We have a robust committee working on this at CSWE and Kendall. And how might you see yourself, visioning yourself in a Fulbright program? Let us know, and we are happy to help. Thanks.
Thanks, Carol. Next on our presentation would be Martha. Martha, I'll pass the time over to you. You're muted.
So thank you so much for for allowing me to join this wonderful presentation. I'm going to be talking about the movement for global well-being, Buen Vivir, which is a specified part of this conference as a whole, and which has special meaning for Kendall and for social work. So the global movement for well-being was begun in the latter part of the last century, when economists noted what social work has always known, that inequality, marginalization, and persecution harm economic growth. They don't help it. And that these harms, or their opposite, biopsychosocial well-being, are impossible to measure by the standards such as GDP, which are and were widely in use to measure positive economic growth. Research in this area indicates that these aspects of what's called subjective well-being are best measured by participatory and contextualized methods. Again, no stranger to social work. The movement envisions economic prosperity emerging from unity and solidarity. It adds to capitalism a concept that when we all succeed together, we're actually richer together than we are apart. This global movement for well-being engaged social workers from its beginning throughout the world. Now, the Kendall vision is really so close, as you've been hearing, to this movement. It reminds particularly those of us based in the US that we have much to learn from the world around us, allowing us to work in solidarity, learning to accompany and to follow, and bring that learning to others in the US who may have been trained in this idea of succeeding alone and competition over everything. Our students today are learning how to study well-being among people struggling with violence and adversity abroad so that they can bring that learning to this most violent of all countries and partner with their communities to design, monitor, and evaluate programs to benefit from international examples, including one from Kenya that is giving that um, is now giving cash to parents affected by child welfare systems in the US, and another that is learned from Nepal about how to include economic empowerment in psychosocial support groups for marginalized women. So, as you can see, this whole program falls together, and I think Peter is going to tell us how and how we can all be engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. We'd like to conclude our presentation with a dialogue among us and in response to these questions. So let me read this first question, and then I'll open it up for our discussants to respond. How do these elements contribute to leaving no one behind? And of course, this is the theme of the gathering.
Well, I'd like to take a stab at that, if I may, colleagues.
Please.
I think it's very clear when we look at, the statistics that I presented on African American students and how they are really left behind in this whole international service learning or study abroad opportunities. And so we don't want to leave them behind. And I think the Kendall Institute provided an opportunity for us to see how we could address that gap where we leave no one, especially those marginalized and disenfranchised students, or as Carol said, those under-resourced institutions. And so our goal then was to increase the capacity of HBCUs to bring international content into their classrooms and to expand international service learning opportunities for more students so they can all be part of the global citizenry. Thank you.
Other thoughts on that question, the theme of leaving no one behind?
Peter, I hadn't really, when Cudore was saying that, I was really thinking about how this directive of Fulbright, of bringing it home, is really critical. And also the push towards study abroad for some students, and other students can't possibly achieve that. Sometimes because they have families at home and jobs and all sorts of things. So this notion of leaving no one behind when it comes to international social work is really about each person does what they can and brings what they can, so that there's a duty both to, when you're collaborating in another country, to be a social worker, to be open to where they are and what their needs are and what they're looking for, that we're not there to impose our own reality, so to speak. So to enter into partnership. And then when you're coming home, don't be stingy with what you've learned, but throw it into the marketplace of ideas back at home and let people figure out what works and what doesn't for them.
Excellent. And I think most people maybe think that international social work education involves travel. And of course, that's a part of it. But what we've heard is that one doesn't necessarily have to travel, that there's international experience from people around us. And through media and social media and Zoom, is that we have access to all kinds of information and projects without having necessarily to travel.
I have a term for that, Peter and colleagues. You've heard it too. We call it localization, that you can be global in your local situation And in local situations, you can also, include international global concerns.
Exactly.
As I come from the great public city university of New York, we are known for the fact that our Nobel laureates were almost all migrant students when they came to us. And what makes our classroom so rich and great is welcoming, leaving no one behind, but welcoming the ideas and thoughts and traditions of all of our students and seeing how they fit in and how they change and our classrooms, and then looking at how they connect to colleagues abroad. And of course, we had one of the strongest, if not the earliest, Fulbrights coming to us from Vietnam when somebody from the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs said, I want to see what US social work looks like, and then we'll adapt our own Vietnamese version of that. Thank you very much. We don't need you coming here. We'll figure it out ourselves. So the Fulbright has really been very rich in exchange in many different ways over time.
Let's move on to the next question, and that is, how do these elements contribute to buen vivir, which is the Spanish word for well-being? And any thoughts on that?
Well, I can take a stab with starting since I've been harping on this, but it is that, one of the countries that's been left behind in terms of the international study of well-being and subjective well-being and happiness is the US. Actually, we fall very low compared to the rest of the world, short of countries in active armed conflict or famine and drought. We fall close to the bottom in terms of feelings of happiness in life and psychological and social well-being. A lot of that has been attributed to the intense competition, marginalization, and the idea of GDP making us number one. So we've been able to learn so much from the global movement from well-being and how to start bringing these ideas home. And our students have really now been able to change the subject when they're talking about psychosocial well-being to say, let's not look at the DSM or the medical model. Let's look at a holistic model of what makes a community thrive. Let's learn from those communities. And there's an awful lot going on that we can learn from globally about how to make the violence that plagues our country come to an end through collaboration.
Yeah.
Yes. And in my case, thank you, Martha. A lot of what you said also resonates with me and our students. What they say, American students become very aware of their privilege. And for our African-American students who think they don't have it, privilege is not just white privilege that we talk about. And so they become very sensitized and they're very appreciative of the fact that they have so much when they come from Africa or South Africa, because they see how much people do with so little. And so they come back here taking those experiences, as Carol mentioned, what they bring to make this world a better place here. And they will also say that what they've learned, and it counters the anti-international, anti-global. Sometimes, we live in institutions where there is tension sometimes around our priorities. But when our students come back, they convert those faculty members who may be a little hesitant or resistant to international work or influences when they say, I come back feeling so much more competent and confident to do work in America. And so I see that as an exchange of well-being all around,
Yeah. Wow. I was really, both of you really hit on this theme of, rather than competition, I think that the Kendall Institute sees this as a world to enhance collaboration, not domination, not competition, but in fact collaboration, which as a group worker myself and what I try to promote at Adelphi at my school is this bringing mutual aid into the classroom, but also into collaboration all the time. It's not always mediated by a social worker in a group, but mutual aid implies this giving and taking, giving and sharing, giving and receiving. It's not equal. It's not an equal measure all the time. It can take time to really develop, but it is magical in that it's not just a one-on-one exchange. When done in the presence of others, this makes the entire group stronger. And so I think that was part of the dream of our founder, but also what many of us find ourselves in working with teams, working with groups of people around the world in their own work, as well as with students. Extraordinary. Makes a difference when there's more than two.
Thank you. The next question is probably the most challenging. In one sense, if we had the answer, we wouldn't be here trying to figure it out. But I think we have to ask the question, and it's of course reinforces the theme of this conference, and that is, how do all of these elements fit together? That's the million-dollar question.
I think we can ask Carol to respond to that one.
Oh, gee whiz, thanks. It is, look, there's a synchronicity, which sounds like it's magical, as if it's a clock done with high design and so on. Really not at all. I think it's more of a synergy of things in the moment, have to have an ethical component, have to have a whatever guides you in your own life, whatever ethics and guidance you have, but also that you take in what you're, we always say start where the client is, start where the community is, but we also say be present. And so I think this notion of how they all fit together is going to be different. Maybe I'm cheating in my answer. You tell me, Cudore. Is that the answer will be different, but the test is, did you consider all those factors? Were you open to the local conditions? Were you open to the demands of the situation, right, the immediacy of the situation? And did you respond appropriately in collaboration with others?
So that we don't leave anyone behind. And as Martha says, so that we can all live the good life.
All right.
For all, to be mindful of those two very important concepts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And values, really.
Wonderful. I think our time is coming to a close. One thought on the last question is that, we usually say, well, what does the client think? And I think that's fitting here, is that, well, we might have an idea of what fits together, but we don't really know until we ask others and who is receiving the resources and the like. And that leads us to the next question, which is, where does the Kendall Institute go from here? And I'd like to, again, remind the viewers to look at the website and to see other activities and other things that we're doing. And we also extend an invitation to collaborate with global partners about doing our strategic vision. But a thought I had, and I think Carol touched on it, is that the Kendall Institute and us as advisory board members see us as a catalyst for collaboration, and that who we know and who we form as our networks, that we want to work together to move Katherine's vision into the future and to leave no one behind. So that's my thoughts on the Kendall Institute. And I just want to allow others to add to that.
No,
before we conclude.
That well.
I think you're good.
Okay, so this is our ending, and we want to share our contact information. So I'm going to leave this up for a little bit, but our emails are here and our names are here, and our institutions that we're affiliated with is here. We thank you even whoever you are, for hearing us and listening to our ideas. And I'm going to allow my colleagues to say farewell.
Sure. We'll see you.